Welcome back to the Blessings podcast. Today I have Dr. Tyler Panzner, Ph.D. He is an expert in holistic genetic health optimization. He is passionate about getting to the root of disease and dis-ease of all kinds. He finds the answers lie in our genetics. He says genetics load the gun, your environment pulls the trigger. And he believes in personalized medicine. He believes in being an advocate for your own health, in taking agency over your well-being. And he will tell you it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Although there may be things we can do and should all be doing in order to limit toxins and optimize nutrition and wellness practices, but Tyler homes in on the unique details that can be uncovered through genetic testing. It's fascinating, and he's jovial and charismatic, easy to talk to, and overall, Tyler is just good people with a mission to serve the greater good, a fellow human doing the right thing. In my experience, people involved in the healing arts and sciences are doing so for a reason, and we are going to plunge into Tyler's story to find out the roots of his compassion for others and why he is the generous and vivaciously health-conscious person he is today. Welcome to the show, Tyler. I'm so happy that you're here.
Me too. Very, very well said. Appreciate your kind words. And yes, excited to dig into some juicy content.
Great. All right, so we're going to go back to the beginning. Where and when were you born?
I was born Bayshore, New York. So actually where I currently reside now in November 14th, 1992. So I turned 30 years old this past November. So starting that new transition from 20 to 30s. And, I always said I don't think much would change. But ironically, I think once I hit 30, it wasn't even like oh, wow, I need to be more mature now. It was kind of like this very ironic subconscious thing that like, I just want to do more, be better. That just so happened to, I've been working hard throughout my whole life, but kind of really started to kick in more.
I love that. The ambition is just palpable in you and what you're doing is so great. So we're going to dig into that, but I want to know a little bit more about your background. So what was in your life, what is the first thing that you can remember, your earliest memory?
Oh, wow. First memory in general. Trying to think. I do remember I remember dancing to my parents were big into classic rock, dancing to Van Halen back in our old house. I was probably 3 or 4 years old. Lots of dancing, lots of high energy, lots of movement, Power Rangers, Batman, all those types of things.
I love it. What did your family look like? What was the structure of your family?
Yeah, so mom and dad, still together. They're on Long Island as well. They're around 20 minutes away from me, and I have one younger brother, 3 years younger than me. So he's 27. So it's us 4. And yeah, overall, really, really great upbringing and no major complaints. And as I've gotten older and branched out and met people, and as I personally get a lot more interested in psychology, childhood trauma, the deep inner healing, I'm deeply spiritual. I'm realizing how, on one side of it, how blessed I am that compared to other people that I've met through other walks of life, I did have a very, very great upbringing. And then on the other side, as I continue to do this inner work on myself, I'm also realizing things that no one has the perfect childhood. Everyone has some degree of trauma. Even being overparented and having everything that you
Mm.
could ever want is a form of childhood trauma that can cause lasting effects to who you are as an adult. So I've been exploring that a little bit more and, realizing, and I mean this in the most loving way, my parents weren't perfect. No parent's perfect. So while recognizing how blessed I am, also starting to do some work and realize some things, behavioral traits that I have that may not be serving my highest self. So trying to dig into that and, get to the bottom of those things as well.
Yeah, very beautifully said because I feel exactly the same way about my childhood and I'm 26 years older than you and I'm still doing
Yeah. Yeah.
still digging into it. As you think about those really younger years, maybe before you're about 10 years old, do you have a significant story that sticks out, something you remember?
I do remember when I was, in elementary school, going to some science camps when I was younger and building things. I've always been very, very interested in science, building like your own like battery car thing. You had to make the wiring right and stuff. I remember there was a trip with the ecology where we would go look at, like, the ponds and stuff for little tide pools. I remember being obsessed as a kid. Big beach family, grew up on Long Island, still love the beach, love boating, love the sun, and I remember going to the beaches at low tide and seeing all these little tide pools, and, as the tide dries up, there's less water, so all the whether it's fish or crabs, they all kind of, like, concentrate together as it slowly dries up before the tide comes in, and I always remember just being so fascinated. I could literally be all day, just completely immersed in that. My brother was always younger than me, following me around, but I was always the one just, "What's over there? Let's go check that out."
I love that. Would you say the beach and that area is like your happy place?
Definitely, definitely. I I like living on Long Island as I'm trying to build my life because the vast majority of the fun I have, the social things I do, I love good weather. And it's kind of nice, but bad, but nice that on Long Island, it's really only maybe 3 months or so that the weather's like nice. So I kind of have like a busy work season. It helped a lot during school, during the PhD, that I could have that period where, all right, I got to buckle down the hatches. I've been over the whole bar scene for several years now. So now it's kind of like I just got to work, be a good boy, chase my dreams. And then I kind of like in the summer being able to like flip that switch, still working hard, but giving myself more grace. You know, if I'm going out with friends, like I'll take a Friday off in the summer for a longer weekend and not really stress about that just because I know that, I only have those 3 months or so. But then the downside too is sometimes you feel like you got to cram all the fun into those 3 months.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a contingency, a continuation of like what you do when you're little, you live for the
Exactly.
summer.
Yeah.
I
Well,
live for
that's a
the
lot of what
summer.
that's a lot of what healing is just simply reconnecting with what you loved when you were a kid, you know what I mean? And that inner child and just expressing yourself. And, this is a whole I haven't made much content or anything about this aspect of stuff, but this new course that I'm launching is going to cover the spiritual side of things and kind of sewing together the nitty-gritty cell biology, genetics with this side of things, because a lot of this epigenetic healing, trauma resolution, it's all very abstract concepts for people. It's like, I get it, but like, what really is it? What's really going on? So such fascinating stuff.
I love it. We're going to dig into that really deeply in a little bit. So, along the lines of kind of what like Dr. Bruce Lipton would talk about, that you're able to have genes, but not necessarily express them. And it may be some experiences in your life which sort of cause things to be activated. Would you say that's right?
It's not so much that's overall correct, but not so much on or off. It's more so how on or how off, if that
Mm,
makes sense. So
mhm.
you can actually absolutely undergo experiences that will, and they actually done studies on this, children that were, in utero in their pregnant mothers, and the mothers, whether they experienced traumatic events, whether it's the Holocaust or 9/11, they've actually done studies of these children as adults. They have these epigenetic changes that you just mentioned that are hardwiring their body to be hypersensitive to cortisol. So
Mm,
that's why so many people are anxious and stressed. Forget about the macro world externally now. The world's pretty much on fire ever since the pandemic. But even internally, these experiences can flip those things and make you more sensitive to stress or have higher adrenaline in your body. And that'll affect sleep. And a lot of people have these sleep issues over time as well. So
mm.
as I do more research, I really believe this whole spiritual unresolved trauma stuff is a much, much bigger contributor to people's poor health than we're led to believe.
Absolutely. That's my jam. I mean, that's what I'm all about. So, if you go back into your life, do you have any experiences that you think maybe shaped some trauma for you? And I don't mean trauma. I think sometimes we use the word trauma, but it doesn't have to be trauma. It could be something that's impacted you.
You can have positive trauma,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Because,
Yeah.
like, I always tell people too, all trauma isn't bad. We need trauma to progress as people. Like, everyone needs to go through that first breakup and get their heart broken to
Yes.
realize that life goes on. That person may not have been for you, but like, you're going to be okay. That's probably one of the main traumatic events that pretty much everyone has to go to, unless you're one of the few people that the first person you fall for is the first person you end up with. But that's exceedingly rare. So I would probably have to say a pivotal shift for me, and this is somewhat recent in the grand scheme of life. When I finished my undergraduate studies in cellular molecular biology, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I ended up getting to some PhD programs, so I skipped the master's program, got in there, and being totally honest, I was pretty much a glorified like frat boy. I was in a fraternity, big into alcohol. I always got good grades, I always made sure my work got done, but I loved, drinking and partying. I'm still a party guy, I'm just not big into, the actual drinking, the toxic drinking aspect. Big social guy, and I really just was not applying myself, doing the bare minimum. And I remember some of the program directors actually talking to me and saying, you should be spending more time in your rotations. So you would have some classes during the day, then you're supposed to go to your lab you're rotating in and basically just get your feet wet, learn some things, show some initiative and show ambition. And believe it or not, back then, the ambition was about, what's the next party, what's the next move, what's the next social event, and really was just not applying myself at all. And, they had to sit down and talk to me. And that was a big, shift for me. Do you want to keep progressing like this? This is before the genetics really caught my eye and this holistic genetic health stuff really took traction. That kind of happened around halfway through, probably 3 or so years into my PhD. But the first year or two, really not applying myself and was kind of dead last in the class, all of these things. And this is one of the moments that really made me kick it into high gear and then not only catch up to all my peers in my class, but actually end up as one of the top people in the class where the professors are like, you did all this yourself in like 2 years. Like, this is astounding. And, it felt good to hear that, but that was a big pivotal shift for me that really made me realize, you're in this PhD program. You got to make the most of it. Otherwise, you could be stuck at these, mediocre scientist positions. And believe it or not, work as a scientist can be very, very brutal, being stuck in that like matrix and bottleneck of there's not a lot of jobs in the academic sphere and everything. So that was a big change for me overall.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, we do kind of float through the teenage years. You get into that party scene, you get to college, and it's a lot of fun, especially for somebody who might not have to do a lot of work to succeed well
Mhm.
academically. And then there does come a point where you have to kind of like have that coming of age moment. I love that you talked about that. That's something I think a lot of people can relate to. So, when you were in high school, what was it that gave you that push to wanna go into the sciences?
Yeah, I remember, I think ninth grade was earth science, 10th grade was biology, 11th grade was chemistry, and 12th grade was physics. My football coach, I was a lineman in football, so my football coach was the earth science coach, and actually the next year, another one was the biology coach, but I remember earth science was, it was interesting to me, but I remember getting to 10th grade into biology. I was in AP biology, the advanced placement for the science classes, and that really just drew me in. Like my entire body is made up of all these little cells that literally have their own world of millions of particles, like little like gears churning around inside of them. And there's trillions of these in like my brain alone that's somehow making me do all this, like think these things and just behave how I behave. And that really, really fascinated me. And that's where I kind of pivoted. Before that, I was interested in more so like I want to be the next Steve Irwin. When Steve Irwin died, I was literally absolutely devastated. I remember sobbing my eyes out. I forgot how old I was when he died. I was pretty young, just sobbing my eyes out for weeks. I would beg my mom. Like I remember I think he was on Sundays on Discovery Channel at like 9 or 10 p.m. on a Sunday. And I would beg my mom every week, can I please watch it? And most of the time she would say no, because I needed to get to bed. But I would just be so happy when I get to watch that. So I initially wanted to be a herpetologist, which studies reptiles. So I had so many lizards. I had so many different lizards growing up. My mom never let me get a snake, but many different lizards growing up. And so that was kind of the shift where I went from the macro scale, I want to study animals, to the micro, I want to study the cells. And chemistry was interesting to me as well, but I've always definitely heavily gravitated towards the biology side of things. Because for the PhD in pharmacology, that's also very it's a kind of a intermix between biology and chemistry, and most of the people in my class had chemistry backgrounds. They're more so, let me synthesize the drug and do that stuff. Meanwhile, I was more so on the side of how do the cells respond to the molecule rather than being on the side of the molecule itself, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So yeah, that 10th grade AP biology class was super, super interesting to me. And I remember distinctly always asking why or how.
Mm.
And it would always end up to the point where, Tyler, we could talk after class because like you're going way too deep for 10th grade AP biology. That's when I started to realize too that passion started to turn on, and realizing that, I'm definitely a lot more inquisitive than even my other peers that, they were on the top end of the class, but especially in the sciences, just always asking why and how.
Hmm. Wow, I can't believe you brought up the Steve Irwin thing. You're reminding me a lot of my son. You're a little bit older than my son, but that was really a terrible
Yeah.
thing. That was a terrible time because there were a lot of kids who just idolized him.
Yeah.
That was devastating. And it's so interesting that you went from having the animals and then just kept going inner and inner and inner, almost like fractalizing down to the smaller particles and then distilling everything. And that's kind of what I'm hearing about the way that you think as well. You start out large and then you just keep going and going and going, asking why, like that Socratic method kind of thing. Beautiful. So if you had one word to describe yourself as a teenager, what would that be?
Hmm. One word.
Let me say it again. One word that how you would describe yourself first.
Yeah. Excitable.
And how do you think that other people would describe you?
Probably excitable or loud or fun,
Okay.
depending who you ask.
What kind of learning style did you have? You're kind of striking me as someone who thinks out of the box, and that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes,
Like,
yes, definitely. And one thing I've been interested in, again, I mentioned the psychology stuff.
yeah,
Like I'm realizing now I definitely have, some level of ADHD, definitely neurodivergent without a doubt. That's the past probably 8 months. That's been, interesting to me. And, there's a lot of overlap between within the umbrella term of neurodivergent. For you guys listening, that just basically means in a nutshell, someone's brain doesn't work like normal people's. Now, that doesn't mean it's a disability. It just means it functions differently. And like you mentioned, outside of the box.
yeah,
And, I'm just fascinated. There's a lot of overlay between ADHD, gifted people. I remember, I think 2 or 3 days a week in middle school, they bust like 10 of the gifted kids to another school where they would, we would get more enriched with science reports, those types of things. So ADHD, gifted people, and even autism has a lot of similarities between these things. So I've honestly been questioning myself. It's it comes off like a joke to some of my friends, but it's also I'm a little bit serious that, I do have some family members that are on the spectrum. The more I look into it, I think I'm more so ADHD, but there's still a lot of, the brain just works differently. A lot of
yeah,
autistic people are extremely talented at, a niche type thing. And that is sort of how I am. Like
yeah,
what I love, what I'm interested in, I will be the best at that ever, go all in on it. But like if I'm not interested in it, it's impossible to get me to do that. That's also some ADHD, those types of things. But regarding the learning style, I'm trying to remember how I learned growing up. I guess college onwards, I really just try to break things down into how take the words that someone says and break that down into concepts and reassemble into a way that makes sense for my brain. And now I guess more
yeah,
recently now, people ask me all the time, do you have any resources I could read to, learn how to do what you do? This is so fascinating. And honestly, I don't read any books. I keep saying I want to. People ask, "Did you read this Dirty Genes genetic book?" This, that. I'm like, honestly, I haven't at all. All I do is just read papers and just kind of glance through, see the overarching thing. And knowing what I know now about cells and pharmacology, I almost don't need to read the full study because I'm a big concepts guy. I'm not a very huge math guy or statistics because the stuff that I'm doing is so far ahead of where science is at, especially with the genetics. Just because a mutation like, let me ask you this question. If there was a study that showed a certain mutation that all humans can have is linked to Alzheimer's disease in a Chinese population, so people from Chinese descent, it's linked to that. Would you think that that is still that same mutation is a contributor to Alzheimer's for all ethnicities of people?
I probably wouldn't.
Okay. See, I would think
Mm,
yes, it just depends how much of it is. Does that make sense? Let me know if I'm losing you
okay.
here.
No,
People
you're
tend
not.
people tend to really think of things as what is the cause? Like,
Okay.
what is the root cause of my Alzheimer's disease? When in reality, everyone is a unique blend of many different contributors. So
Okay.
that's why I look very detailed at these things. And I'm like, hey, your vitamin D pathway is heavily mutated. Vitamin D may help you 7% with your Alzheimer's. I'm throwing out numbers here. You know what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean? But this
yeah.
it is highly linked that low vitamin D is linked to Alzheimer's. Mutations that affect vitamin D are linked to Alzheimer's. So like you see now everyone's focused on this all these ApoE4 genes and all these other types of things. But I'm looking at, hey, if vitamin D can help you set even 3%, and we
Mhm.
stack a couple of these other things up together, different pathways, that's how we're able to get these big improvements. So overall for me, again, just reading a bunch of studies, connecting dots in my head, and then just I talking it through. Like I'm a big person. Like I love the more longer format type things, but that's why I love doing podcasts or like Instagram lives because people can kind of be on the journey as I'm explaining my thought process, like I just did to you.
Mhm.
And then that topic would be very, very hard to explain, in a 1 minute thing.
Yeah. The way I look at it is there isn't just one way of getting to an answer, and that people with neurodivergence are particularly creative thinkers
Yep.
because they can find other ways. And that is relatable because, not everybody fits into that box. And when you're looking at it, in particular academically, you've got this, we function academically on the bell curve. There's most people are going to fit in the middle here someplace, but I think we're increasingly moving that curve and the trajectory of the curve, and more people are thinking out of the box in different ways. And I think that lends itself well to more creativity in the world, entrepreneurship, and just finding answers to things that we don't understand, like what you're doing with genetics. So that's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. And I even when I was doing my PhD and I was doing like lab experiments and stuff, it would just always be such an abundance of ideas. And I guess part of that's the ADHD. I'm an ideas guy. I have so many ideas, all these crazy hypotheses and stuff, but trying to stick and see it through, that's where my boss, my lab mentor had to kind of like guide me like, listen, I know that you literally have enough ideas to last 10 PhDs, but like you got to sit down and actually get that done because to me, just simply doing what other people are doing isn't interesting or stimulating enough for me. Like I would be so bored. This is not a knock to medical doctors or physicians, but I personally would be so bored. Just here are the symptoms, here's our protocol. You give these tests for these symptoms. And if the values come back in this range, this is what you do. Like to me, that just wouldn't stimulate me enough. You know what I mean? So couldn't agree more with what you're saying. And with the neurodivergence comes, I'm also a highly sensitive person as well.
Yeah.
I used to think that was a weakness,
Mm.
friends growing up, they're still my friends now, but be like, why are you so uptight? Why do you care so much? It's just a joke, this and that. And now I'm realizing it's absolutely a superpower because being highly sensitive is due to high dopamine, high adrenaline, and those also drive creativity. That's why most artists and creatives are also a lot more prone to anxiety. Growing up, I didn't mention this as well. I'm very, very artistic, won a lot of different art competitions growing up in the high school and stuff, painting, pastels, music as well, played trumpet in jazz band, taught myself guitar, some piano, and now I'm all in. I really love electronic music. And to me, it started out with just, I want to have a good time, dance and party. But now it's really to me turned into I view music as tools to alter your cell biology. Without a doubt, I think, the right music, the right healing frequencies around the right people in the right mind state, without a doubt, are a huge pivotal component to resolving a lot of these traumas and these types of things. So, yeah, overall, very, very creative, outside of the box type of guy. And, it reflects in my content with the genetic stuff. But that's why in the near future, I do want to put a little more personal stuff on the doctor account because, I am my brand. I do think people would appreciate that.
Yeah. When people can relate to you, it builds trust. And that, I think that's really important to reveal things, that are appropriate and to tell a little bit about your story. So I'm glad we're digging into that. I mean, everything you're saying, you're just speaking my language, the music stuff, everything. It's just so interesting to me. So we're going to talk more about that. When you were going through and figuring out what you wanted to do, because you do have so many ideas,
Mhm.
how did you decide when you got into school that you were gonna go on and get that PhD? And, like, what did you want to be? What did you wanna get out of it? Who did you
Yeah.
want to become?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. It might have been junior year of college. Again, I was still, applying myself, but still, going with the flow. I mean, I studied, especially towards the end, I had to study a lot, but I would also work hard, play hard. So I wasn't really thinking about that. I knew I didn't want to be a medical doctor. Pharmacy seemed pretty cool, but I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't want people to be bitching at me, get me my medication, you're doing your job wrong. I don't want to be a pharmacist. I don't want people bitching at me, give me my medications, this or that.
Mhm,
So I was looking at a lot of different career paths. There were like biomedical engineers, all these different things. And I remember I was going to office hours for I think it was cell metabolism professor. And I remember he said, well, you should look into like pharmacology in grad school. And I didn't really know what that was. I looked up pharmacology and I'm like, yep, this is it without a doubt. So, pharmacy is more so kind of like I mentioned with the medical doctors. You have these set rules about the drugs and the current rules and how to dispense them properly and safely. Pharmacology are the people, the creatives, the innovators, the people that are literally doing the research to discover new things. What is a new type of drug we can make? What is a new angle or pathway we can exploit to help with a certain type of disease? So that's where the pharmacology came into play. So I definitely want to do something with that. I was making my own pre-workout powders, nootropic stuff back then and everything. Just really fascinated with how you can alter your brain. So
mhm.
neuropharmacology, how drugs, substances affect the brain was really interesting to me because I could drink this coffee and it wakes me up. It's not magic, it's just doing something to our cells. And I remember I figured, "Oh, I'll just go for a PhD and see if I could get into that." And I remember my parents were like, "Are you sure you wanna sign up for another 5 or 6 years of school?" And looking back, I applied, I got into a couple of programs because most people do that, 2 years master's program to dip their feet in and see if that's really what they wanna go for. Looking back, it was honestly sort of a reckless decision, huge leap of faith. It was like, "Whoa, I really just said, 'Screw it. I'm just gonna dedicate another half a decade to schooling.'" But it also could not have been a better decision for me. So, like, looking back, it was a little reckless, jumped the gun a little bit. I was like, "Oh, whatever, 5 more years, why not?" But without a doubt, the way my brain works, I would have done a master's. I would have just done the PhD right after anyways, and it would have cost me another year or so, which in the grand scheme is nothing. But at the same point, me coming in the PhD, let me think. I finished undergrad in May, and after 4th of July weekend, I was moved back up to New York because I did undergrad down in Florida, and I was starting my first rotation for the PhD. So literally right out of the undergrad, started that PhD, and that was part of the reasons too. I wasn't applying myself, but also most of these people in my class, they had 2 years of med school under their belt, or they had a master's under their belt, or they had a master's and they worked for 2 years, or they worked as an undergrad for 3 years. So I was definitely the least experienced you could be on paper, but also just in general. But yeah, overall, decided on the pharmacology and then the leap of faith for the PhD to understand the pharmacology better.
And then what was your intention? What were you gonna do with it?
So honestly, wasn't I just assumed, a pharmacologist. I
Mhm,
didn't really know exactly because also I didn't do that I did some research in undergrad. I didn't do as much research as some of these other people that were in the class with me. So I didn't really know exactly what it was gonna be like, and once I started actually working in the lab, designing these ideas, growing my cells, putting the cells in the dish, thinking how long I'm gonna treat them for, what do other people do, how do I do this? Like, I really did love that, and honestly, I do miss certain aspects of that, the creativity of you can do whatever you want and design experiments however you want and just have these ideas. A lot of my experiments I was doing, were very unique approaches that people didn't really think of, just for how my brain works there.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know exactly what I was going to be after that. But I do remember as, maybe probably a year and a half out from graduating, roughly 2 years out from graduating, had to start thinking what I wanted to do. I remember I interviewed so many different people, different career paths. I interviewed big pharma lawyers just to see, because I literally had no idea. I was kind of just living in the moment, taking it day by day. If I wanted to just continue to be the guy with the pipette and the goggles and the lab coat, like literally doing that, I did have some interviews for those types of labs. Trying to think what else. Being something called a medical science liaison. So basically for biotech companies, you need PhD scientists to basically not sell, but after you make a sale, you need a other scientific professional. The salespeople for these companies, they just know the bare minimum of science. They don't have a
Hmm.
science background. So you need an expert in how your technology works to talk to those doctors that are going to start using, whether it's your test or your product. That definitely was the top of the pack, top of the pile for me because I love communicating science to people. But as the genetics started coming into play, I ended up taking a role as a genetics analyst for a personalized medicine company, like a genomics company, a public company. And I was staring at Excel sheets all day. I thought it'd be a bunch of people, just like me wanting to change the world. And guess what? It's a bunch of, honestly, not a knock to anybody, just regular people that do what they have to do for their job.
Hmm.
Then they go home and they're regular people. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. This is not talking down or anything. I just literally eat, sleep, breathe science every millisecond I'm alive. I'm constantly, I feel like this, was it this thing I added or removed or this or that? Or my wife feels anxious, just trying to like constantly calculating all of these things. And I just thought more people would be like that, but hey, that was kind of, and that's where I was at for a year and a half after graduating, and I left there in January to go all in on my practice now.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting. You're like a really good example of someone who just kind of follows things that light them up. And
Yeah,
you're like so excited about what you do and you follow things that light you up and opportunities come. And then there's a whole different range of choices. And it's okay to choose something and then realize that that thing isn't going to work out for you if it's not going to be a fit. But you're like a really good example of somebody who is in tune with their feelings and their body and how things are matching up, both genetically and in terms of all of the
yep,
supplements, but also in your life practices. And I think that that is a way that you could really serve your self actualization well to be able to follow that and to trust it and to have the faith that things are going to work out.
absolutely. Being totally honest, I remember I'm definitely, big worrier, overthinker. Overthinking can be a good thing, but it also can definitely be a bad thing. I remember being so like my stomach was gonna fall out, just so nervous that like I'm not gonna figure it out. Like all these other people, they have clear goals, what they want, their PhD projects are more on point because people just think differently.
Mhm.
Most people in these PhDs, they kind of have their set path that their, boss is, their lab manager is telling them to do, and they have the clear path and they do those things and then they graduate. Versus me, it's kind of like I'm all over the place. Now, honestly, I would say even as early as honestly the past 2 weeks, like I've been going through a lot of stress lately, like trying to figure out how to scale, my practice, this and that, because it's a very unique thing that I think very few people have to think about. When you know the things that I know and the miracles I've seen happen for the people that I work with that have been failed by dozens of doctors,
Yeah.
conventional and holistic medicine, and I'm able to help them with literally, here's a handful of supplements to take, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, and they're able to like get these massive improvements. I feel a massive moral obligation to make sure this gets properly shared and distributed with the world. And there's a spectrum by which you can do this. Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, he lives in a $50,000 house that's right next to his factory. Clearly, he took the very extremist route of all in on my mission. You know, he's had failed marriages, this and there's definitely cons to that, So I've struggled a lot with trying to find the proper ratio of I love my life, like I have an amazing wife, amazing friends, and I do want to experience that. But something I've struggled with probably the past 6 months or so. Once I was totally on my own, no other salary, I got to do all of this. And it's like how quickly you can't rush these things. And I've been realizing a lot lately. I've only been doing it, 6, 7 months all on my own. And it's like I'm allowed to be a human while still advancing these things. So even as recent
Yep.
as the past 2 weeks, I've really been a big change, feeling a lot more calm that like I don't have to fit everything into one day. I could just do one
Yep.
thing after another, after another, after another, and then maybe 6:30 at night. And then you know what? I'm kind of done for the day. I'm done. And I don't have that feeling like I have a gun to my head. You got to get all these things done. Last night I was working till 9:30 at night. You know what I mean? Just kind of depends on the day. So giving myself a lot more grace is something that's literally as recent as the past 2 weeks has been helping me a lot.
Yeah. I could relate to you so well because I'm a highly sensitive person. I always have a million ideas. I always want to do a million things. And I feel like I can never get everything done.
Yep.
And so I understand that. And I love what you're saying. I mean, I want to dig into so many things, but I want to ask you a quick thing first. Tell us the story of how you met your wife.
Oh, this is a funny story. So she was throwing javelin, University of South Florida. So D1 athlete. And you're younger than me. She came in the summer semester she started before her freshman year. I was up in New York for, summer break for going into my sophomore year. So I'm 1 year older than her. And, like shotgunning a beer where you like put a key inside of it and everything. Yeah, I remember having some of my fraternity brothers text me and they're like, yeah, this girl Mira, she's like beating like pretty much everyone in the house right now. Like all the fraternity brothers that were good at shotgunning kind of went away for vacation, and like I'm pretty much undefeated in shotgunning in like 4 states. Like that literally was like my MO, and like I attached, that gave me a dopamine dump. And like it's funny looking back now, like basically bragging. I would shotgun like a 24 ounce, like in like literally less than a second. And that was like I'd shotgun literally 15 beers in a night, and like looking back, it's like, "Oh my god, how did I do between the gluten and the alcohol, like, how did
Yep.
I do that?" You know what I mean? But so I remember before the first day of classes, there was a hurricane, and they canceled the first day of classes. So what did we do? We threw a hurricane party. We set up a slip and slide out in the front of the fraternity house, and then she came in with her teammate, roommate. They're like, "Yeah, this is her, whatever," and it's just ironic that I was like, "Okay, hi, hey," just another girl. I kinda like, it was kinda like blew her off almost a little bit, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But then over time, got to talk to her more that night, and we were actually best friends for the whole first semester. So it was literally that story of I beat the friend zone. So that was the first day we met, and then we basically were literally inseparable, completely, non-romantic, 100% to the core, just best friends, whenever we could see each other, we'd be doing something cool. So, yeah, and then we were together for what? Over 10 years, got engaged after the PhD, got surprise wedding right after that. We pretty much surprised, everyone thought it was a graduation engagement party. And then we're like, surprise, no, it's actually a wedding. So that was going on 2 years ago next month. So we've been
Oh my
together a
god.
long time.
How fun. What was the moment you got out of the friend zone?
So
Who broke the seal first?
no, so I basically had to say, you know, like, I really like you, and you know, if we can't actually be, like boyfriend, girlfriend, I don't think I could keep hanging out around you. You know what I mean? Because like
Yeah.
that's where my heart is like going towards. So I remember she said, "Okay, like I don't know if I'm ready for that." And then I'm trying to think how long it was. It was maybe 24 or 48 hours, of us not communicating for the first time, just because I literally was like, I need to just cut this off. There's 40,000 people at this university. Like it is what it is. She reached back out and was like, okay. And then, she had boyfriends, like in like 7th grade, that type of stuff. But
Yeah.
like I was actually her first, real legitimate boyfriend. So yeah, so she couldn't, a day or so without me and was like, "Oh my God, I'm making a mistake. So we'll give it a run." And here we are now.
What a great story. I love that. Oh my God. Thanks for sharing that. All right, let's dig into some science stuff. I love what you said about, well, you mentioned that most people, when they feel something in their body, they're going to go to the doctor. The doctor's going to run them through a series of diagnostics that are predetermined. They've got some kind of like protocols they have to follow. And then they're going to recommend a medicine, or they're going to, they're going to send you somewhere
Yep,
or give you something to take. And people have fallen into that as their go to. That's what
yep,
they think is going to solve their problems. But I think we're in a world now where we're increasingly finding that does not work for everyone. It works for things like if you break your arm. It works,
exactly.
if you have something that's very obvious that needs a special fix that does have a 1-to-1, like a ratio between the injury and the fix, or the disease and the fix. But so many more people have things that don't fall into those categories now. And I think it's just that's exploding.
Yep,
Like I've found that in my own life. I know a lot of other people. I've seen, a lot of medical doctors are now getting their functional medicine certification so that they can break out of that sort of matrix that they're in.
yep.
And so I want to know, like, what are your thoughts about that? And what are you doing that can help people who have found that the medical system, the traditional system, is not working for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love what you mentioned. We do need conventional medicine for trauma, acute injuries. I'm literally going to die right now. Keep me alive. We
Yes.
need them. We also need big pharma because we would be dying from a scraped knee from an infection. So,
Yeah.
as anti-establishment as I am, at the end of the day, that conventional medicine training, I would never, ever be able to do what I do now without that. And honestly, that conventional medicine training, on top of just how I am, how my brain works, that's a huge reason why I'm able to do what no one else can do, because a lot of these genetic coaches, which I'm friends with a lot of them, they're great, but it's just different when you come from, even if it could be several health certification degrees. I'm not even saying, again, not trying to talk down. I'm just saying it's different here, doing some health certifications versus doing, a decade of that research, especially when 6 of those years were hyper focused on literally. My undergrad was how cells work, and then my PhD was how do things affect cells. So it's just a different angle I'm able to approach it from. But yeah, we need big pharma, we need conventional medicine, but anything chronic related, trying to live your best life, it's as good as garbage. And honestly, as I've been seeing more clients, I'm just being more and more, because I never really went to the doctor much in general. Just hearing these horror stories from the doctors and stuff. And I'm trying to start be a little more bold with how I word things, because I hate now Instagram. People are so quick to debunk people and rip
Mhm.
people apart for views and stuff. And to me, that's not leading with love. When all you do is debunk people, something's wrong. You're not a happy person. It's one thing to respectfully, disagree with something and like, you could call someone out, but always and forever, the vast majority of my content will always be creative, innovative ideas that you'll never hear anyone else,
Yeah.
anywhere else, not just tearing people down. So, yeah, like you said, the doctors will look at some of the symptoms, give you some tests, and they give you a pharmaceutical that they likely get kickback for. Like, you literally have
Yes.
these pharmaceutical companies not only paying the FDA, who's supposed to regulate them, they're lobbying for politicians. They're literally paying doctors. I remember, you can look up, it's public information, how much money different physicians take from different pharmaceutical companies. My wife got put on Adderall throughout undergrad, and she was on it for probably 5 years or so. She's been off it for many, many years now, but boy, that was brutal trying to get her off of that. But looking up the physicians all around the big university,
Mhm.
and pretty much all of them took a large sum of money from Teva Pharmaceuticals, which is the pharmaceutical company that creates brand name Adderall. So you have these pharmaceutical
Mhm.
companies putting X picking where they're gonna put more money in. So where are there 50,000 students that wanna study, they're gonna want Adderall to ace their tests, and they're gonna put more money there. So it really goes so deep, and the root cause there's no care for the root cause for
Yeah.
conventional medicine. And, we could finish this, but then I could even go into where I think holistic medicine, it's definitely a huge step in the right direction. But, we could finish the conventional medicine side, then go into the holistic, and then I could go even further where, I'm going beyond that because I think people really misuse the word root cause a lot of the time. And it's just due to, in my opinion, a lack of education. Because again, especially in the holistic space, there's no conventional medicine trained. Some of the most intelligent people that I've ever spoken with are the holistic like the
Yes.
creativity and the critical thinking, the way they view these things, their intuition is incredible. But at the end of the day, there's no real complete substitution for the type of training that I went through, especially when it comes to cell biology and how supplements and drugs work.
It's unfathomable, first of all, the corruption that takes place, with that, the kickbacks from the pharmaceuticals. And then also, I think a lot of doctors are afraid. They're afraid of
Yep.
not following protocols because of their licensure
Or they
requirements.
could be socially exiled. They might
They could
keep
be
their
exiled.
license, but they could be socially exiled, and
They could be. They
I
won't
couldn't
even talk to you unless you go through certain protocols or, certain hoops that they had. They literally it feels like when I'm in the doctor nowadays, they have a playbook. And
Yep,
I am always asking questions that are outside of the playbook. And I've had doctors even recently just shut me down. I won't even talk about that
yep,
until I can get you to do X, Y, and Z first. And I don't play by that game
yep.
because I think you have to be your own advocate. You have to take agency over your health. And when you can find out information like what you're able to provide, it gives you that agency.
Exactly, and that's what I really try to when I work with my clients, it's not just a genetic printout sheet like all these other companies. I'm literally giving you a lot of based on the genes and the symptoms you tell me and the notes you give me, but we have an hour-long conversation because when I ask you, "Okay, how does your anxiety and depression interact? Is it that you're anxious all the time, so you get burnt out and then you get negative thoughts? Or are you depressed first, and then it makes you anxious because you can't do anything?" Like, that will dictate out of the 20 or 30 recommendations I have, that'll dictate which ones I give you specifically, even though someone else may have the exact same mutation. So it's not nearly as scalable, but I'm focused on, I view it as an art. I'm an artist and a doctor,
Mm,
and I'm focusing on doing what is literally the best thing for people. Figure that out first, then figure out scaling. All these other companies are focused on just getting the kits out to hundreds of thousands of people and then giving them that printout. And that's why so many people I work with, they've spent money, thousands on all these genetic tests, and they're still not putting the pieces together because people aren't looking at it from through my lens. I'm literally getting this information and putting together a full thing. Do you have depression, gut and joint stuff? That'll dictate what type of protocol I give you. But as I'm learning more things, there's only so much stuff I could fit into an hour. So eventually, pretty soon, I'm gonna have to start making, just a mental health thing, just a joint health thing. Right now, it's kind of just tell me what your issues are. I'll kind of try to fix all of them. But again, as I learn more, I got to value my time as well. You know what I mean? So it's like
yeah.
if I got to talk to you for 2 hours instead of one, that's going to be more expensive. So how do I try to keep it accessible to people as well?
Yes, but you are providing something that's invaluable. So, like,
Yes.
that's almost priceless. But so when you do your work, are you recommending just supplements or are there other recommendations you make beyond supplements?
Yeah, so I'm definitely, as a pharmacologist, it's definitely, primarily vitamins and supplements, but it's also foods and nutrition
Mm,
as well. I've been into fitness bodybuilding my whole life, so I know a lot about, like that type of nutrition, but right now I'm not going into like the exact meal plan type stuff. But what I do, I figure out based on your genetics, which types of foods have nutrients you need more of, or which of them have nutrients or chemicals. And I'm not talking about pesticides. I'm talking about naturally occurring chemicals in
yeah.
these foods that your body can't break down quite as well. So you might want to make sure you're limiting them. I'm very vocal about histamine. It's really important for allergies. I think histamine is the number one overlooked factor for pretty much everyone's issues: brain fog, anxiety, depression, joint pain, arthritis, psoriasis, eczema, hives. pretty much all these different IBS, bloating, IBD, Crohn's disease, all of these things, Alzheimer's disease as well, ADHD, all of
Wow.
these things have clear links to high histamine. It just depends based on your genetics, which organ types are the most affected. I had severe brain fog. I thought I was being poisoned at my lab from a chemical leak. No, turns out I severely allergic to peas and almonds. I ate them pretty much every day for lunch. And I was severely allergic to mice, and I worked with them almost every day for 6 years. I never got hives. I never got anything external.
Yeah.
Mine was brain fog, anxiety, and just fatigue and like lethargy, kind of a mix of those 3 depending on the day.
Hmm.
Got rid of those foods, had my buddy take care of the mice, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is an entirely new world for me." And who would have thought? I wish I got hives. You know what I mean? Because then I would have known. I would have thought of an allergy. I thought it was a chemical leak. I didn't know what it. I literally thought it was the fluorescent light bulbs in the lab because there are studies
Yeah.
showing that those light bulbs can cause inflammation. Because I would go to lab after feeling great after the gym, and I would feel horrible. Because what did I do? I went to the mice right away, and then I would do something and then go eat lunch. So I would just be completely incapacitated within an hour of getting to lab. And just who would have thought it was that? You know what I mean? But I've worked with so many people that coffee and apple cider vinegar are very, very high in histamine. So many people I work with have the brain fog or anxiety, and they're having apple cider vinegar and coffee first thing in the morning. And I'm like, your body, due to the mutations, cannot break down that histamine as well. And it's funny. I used
Hmm.
to think that, well, I'm definitely a sensitive person, but I used to think I was like special and like, just so overly sensitive. But now that I've seen hundreds of people, I realize a lot of people, these same little, a lot of people would dismiss this as, that stuff doesn't matter. It's too this or that, kind of brush it under the rug. Well, so many people I've worked with, I've changed their lives by identifying these same types of patterns that you go to the doctor, you have brain fog, they're just going to give you Adderall or something. They're not even going to check. You have ADHD, you can't focus. I think most people don't need ADHD or depression medication, at least 95% of them. Fixing histamine, I work with so many children and adults with ADHD. Fixing their histamine helps immensely with the ADHD. Instead of just giving them Vyvanse or Adderall or something that leads to horrific side effects over time.
I love it. So what you're saying is we should be doing more of a genetic test rather than the typical like allergy scratch test that we do.
So the allergy scratch test, that's what I got done. A lot of people get these food sensitivity tests, the blood tests, which honestly are pretty much garbage. How often you eat the foods will dictate how high it comes up.
Okay.
The skin prick tests, they're great, but obviously I'm biased here, but I just really think I work with so many people that have spent 50, $80,000 in tests the past year or two. And they work with me and I'm like, yep, boom, check engine light, this, that, clear issues, just like that. And is everyone like that to that degree? Not necessarily, but it makes sense doing this first. You always get answers. Everyone has mutations. Not a single person here listening doesn't have a mutation that we could improve upon. And that's why I 1000% believe every human being on the face of the earth could feel better by using my workflow. It just
Mhm.
depends, where your health status is at. Do you want to be, a go-getter and like, high level entrepreneur, or do you just want to like be able to play with your kids and not have joint pain, So it all depends on where you're currently at, what you want out of life. Um, but yeah, I think does my workflow always fix everything for everyone always? No. Hate people that are so absolute with that. I've yet to work with someone that doesn't feel better. It just depends. Are you going to feel 80% better in 2 days? I've had clients that literally say, in their words, I'm cured of their depression or anxiety within 2 days of starting this. Other people, it's a month or two goes by, they're 20% better, and they're still
Mhm.
grateful for that 20%. It's just that may not, when you've been unhealthy for decades of your
Yeah.
life, it may be hard just to take a couple of pills and completely eradicate all of that.
Yeah. It takes years. It could take years.
Yeah.
What's the most severe thing that you've ever helped somebody to get better from?
So, I need to put a disclaimer. I'm not allowed,
Yeah.
to say that I can cure
Cure.
or treat any of these diseases. But what I will say is that I've had numerous clients with autism spectrum disorder, adults, young adults, children, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and they've been able to get, improvements. I will say the Alzheimer's disease cases, weren't extremely severe or advanced, but they definitely were diagnosed for that. I think the further along the disease progresses, the much harder it is, to really pull back all the way from that. I literally just booked a follow-up with one of my Parkinson's clients that has literally like 5 different things that have been improved upon, and they're literally asking, should he be coming off these medications for Alzheimer's that he's on? And honestly, I gotta do some thinking because that's where it gets a little tricky
Mm,
here,
mhm.
because I don't wanna step on toes here, and, this is still a new frontier of medicine, so I'm glad he's feeling better, but I have to do some thinking about that because N no one with Alzheimer's disease has ever been on this protocol before, let alone come off of the medications they've been on for many years for the Alzheimer's. So I don't really know exactly what will happen. So it's gotta be tread very, very carefully with that. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, trying to think. I've had some.
Autoimmune, like, what about
Yeah.
autoimmune,
Yep,
MS?
yep, actually MS as well. I've had one client as well, and you'd be shocked, again, the genetic causes of these things are all quite similar. It's just some
Mhm,
people, it's autoimmunity of the brain, other people,
mhm.
it's of the skin, other people, it's this type of inflammation or that type of inflammation. I have worked with some cancer clients. However, that's more so to optimize their health. I studied cancer for my PhD. So that's incredibly, incredibly complex. That's the one thing. If people come to me with that, I'm like, we got to be manage expectations here with that. You know what I mean? But I have worked with people that currently have cancer that really don't feel good. They're not on chemo. They did chemo or whatever, and they just feel like crap. And they do feel a lot better. Now, I have no data and I'm not making any claims about, the reduction in tumor size, remission. Like it's the wild west at this point with that. But that's why I'm so excited for the future.
Yeah,
Eventually, I wanna be running studies that are properly controlled for people with, but here's the problem with that. If I don't have a cancer protocol, I don't have a mold protocol, I don't have a MS protocol, I have a U protocol.
yeah.
So how do you really study if you need 100 cancer patients to see if it helps or not? Working with me, there's literally no chance they're all on the exact same things. So that means I need to either purposely put people on something I don't think makes the most sense for
Mhm,
them or not put them on something that I do think makes sense for them. You know what I mean? Because for a
mhm,
scientific study, you need everyone to be on the same thing. And that's why I'm sure as I continue to gain,
mhm.
traction, people are going to call me out, say there's no studies to back this up. But like, this is why I'm big on concepts because you can't properly study what I'm doing because it's so nuanced and hyper personalized. Unless we
Right.
had a bunch of identical twins, half of them have cancer, half of them don't. That would pretty much be the only way to perfectly study this.
I don't know, I think there's a way. I mean, I think you're gonna find something that will come along that will help you to make it evident that this is something that works for people, even
Yep,
though it's individualized. I mean, and like the idea of becoming your own advocate and taking agency over your health, you have to take some risks. Like it's not even actually a risk. It's just going outside of the
yep,
box, knowing that we don't know what we don't know. And just having faith that, the doctors, I always say doctors are not gods. Like they do not have all the answers. Um,
absolutely.
and you really have to stand up for yourself. And if you feel like something is helping you, then continue going in that direction. I mean, you
Yeah,
you know your body, right?
yeah, and that's one thing I always tell people too is I obviously use the genes as the main thing driving decisions. I'll be totally honest, vast, vast majority of the time, it lines up like clockwork. But
Mhm,
sometimes we'll have 4 mutations pointing towards a certain nutrient or supplement. They try it, they feel like crap.
mhm,
And this is what's interesting too is I work with a lot of people with infections, mold, Lyme disease,
yeah,
heavy metals, and how do you tell the difference between a detox reaction, meaning I've had people start the supplements, the protocol, within a day or 2, their urine will literally turn green because we broke open a biofilm and unleashed hidden bacteria, and it's literally turning their urine green because the body, the immune system, wasn't able to properly identify and attack and destroy these pathogens. Within 2 days, giving the right nutrients for their body, it ignites all the stuff. They can attack that. How do we figure out they're feeling like crap because it's a detox reaction or if it just doesn't make sense for their biology? And that's something that I'm getting better at understanding depending on the nutrient Sometimes certain things for brain health, neurotransmitter support, we try boosting GABA, or maybe not GABA. We try, lowering adrenaline in someone that's anxious, and we lower it too much. And now they're just like, I don't even want to get out of bed. And then we got to, re-strategize there. But okay, big deal. They had one day they felt kind of off and they wasted $20 on a supplement. That's why I
Mhm.
love being all natural. Everything I recommend, you could get on your own without working with me. It's just
Mhm.
in the immense, infinite sea of all these supplement and vitamin products. How do you know which one makes sense for you? You have all these different influencers dressed up, half naked, whatever, saying, use this product if you have this ailment. And this is where everyone's getting it wrong. It's not, I'm anxious, give me a calming supplement. It's which pathway of anxiety is overactive or underactive, and let's specifically support that pathway. And that's why I really don't do as much of the affiliate marketing, promoting general product recommendations. I made a post about ADHD and histamine the other day. All the comments, how do you lower histamine? And I'm like, I hate withholding. I'm not withholding information. It's immensely different for each person. Are you
Mhm.
eating too much histamine? Do you have a certain pathway mutated for histamine? That's not another pathway. Those require different nutrients to help function better. Is it, a big vitamin D deficiency, which is related to histamine? And this is what's very difficult. And, I'm very happy with how my page has been growing. But this is why, it's a lot more difficult to grow because it's so niche and it's hard to really wrap your head around that. I can't just give this is why I don't really like Twitter that much. I can't just give a sentence or two. That's just
Mhm.
not how my brain works. I need to be elaborate and explain it. But in today's age, unless you say, like, if you don't feel good, take this supplement now or you're gonna die. Like that's all it is now. And that's what makes these people grow around the fear.
Yeah.
And it bothers me. But at the
Yeah.
same point, I do need to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit because I do need to grow, not even because I wanna be bigger, because I need to get this information
Yeah.
out to other practitioners. I'm gonna start doing more posts about the dangers of supplements. Like I made one
Yeah.
about, is your curcumin supplement making your hair fall out? I've had many clients, particularly female, their hair's falling out. They have no idea why. They're doing iron infusions. Their holistic practitioner put them on a high dose curcumin supplement for their inflammation, but they didn't know that curcumin also chelates iron out of the body, which leads to anemia, which leads to hair loss.
Mm.
I see this all the time, and it's mind blowing to me. These practitioners don't even think it's the curcumin because it doesn't say on a curcumin bottle it'll lower iron. They don't put that on there. You need to read a study and look that
Mhm.
up to see that. And that's why I had a client yesterday. I literally got off the call, went to my wife. I'm like, this poor freaking girl. She was on like so many products that elevate her. They help her make more adrenaline and they slow down how quickly she breaks down adrenaline. And I was like, if I was taking half of what you're taking, I would be off the deep end, the most miserable version of myself, petrified of everything. And a naturopathic doctor put her on pretty much all of these supplements. And it's just the disconnect is insane to me. But again, all these practitioners mean well. They all are trying to help. This isn't they're trying to mess people up or whatever. It's just a lack of awareness, a lack of education. Because I don't know if I mentioned this before. I did, I think. You don't need any education on supplements to recommend supplements. And
Right.
that's why I'm starting to make this holistic genetic health mastery course to educate self healers, just biohackers and other practitioners as well, because the way to help the most people, the best way possible, is to share this with other practitioners. I can only see so many people.
Yeah. What's another supplement that is commonly misused? You mentioned quercetin online. I'm curious about
Yeah,
that.
quercetin's actually that's a very good example as well. Quercetin, there's a lot of supplements that actually there's no such thing as a supplement or drug that does only one thing in the body. Everything does many things, and you'd be shocked. Like curcumin does like at least 50 things, 100 things in the body. So
Wow.
you're just taking that. How are you sure that one of those things, I can't check everything always, but I know what are the most common things to look for in people. But a lot of these supplements, including curcumin, they block the breakdown of adrenaline and dopamine. And I have a mutation. I break down dopamine and adrenaline 4 times slower than a normal person. So that's where the creativity, the excitability, the anxiety, the insomnia, a lot of those things are improved immensely now. I sleep through the night now. But taking quercetin that blocks that enzyme sends me. I remember the first day I took quercetin, it was allergy season, because again, it says anti-allergy, antihistamine on the bottle. I took it. I felt like a god for the first 2 hours because I was building up that dopamine and adrenaline. But then I was sitting at a conference and during my PhD, I literally had to leave 2 hours after that. I literally my heart was pounding. I was like, "Oh my god." Like, I feel like this is like the worst type of cocaine, Adderall, caffeine, pre-workout. Like, what is going on? And I probably chugged half a bottle of CBD that day, went home. I was still up till sunrise the next day. Melatonin didn't work because my body, that was already in my body, 10-hour half-life, jacking up my adrenaline. And I see that all the time. If you look at any antihistamine products out there, virtually all of them have quercetin. And there's
Mhm.
a lot of these other supplements, like oregano oil is another one people use a
Mhm.
lot
Mhm.
that also does these things. Rosemary, resveratrol, that's really big in the longevity space for boosting mitochondrial health. These products do a lot of good things in the body. But if you're sensitive to adrenaline, and a lot of people are, most people I work with have these mutations. That pro of antihistamine is not worth the con of higher adrenaline.
So you might not be able to sleep,
Yeah, sleep, people feeling tense, and I'll make a post.
anxiety.
Oh,
Would it rate?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Anxiety, just feeling tense. I call it feeling like you have the monkey on your back.
Okay.
No matter what, you never feel totally present or calm. Like something feels a little off. Even at the end of the day, you just can't really seem to just get like comfortable, like in your skin. I remember I made a post about this a while ago. And again, kinda like I mentioned with the allergy stuff I mentioned to you. I'm like, "Oh, I'll throw it out there," you know, and I literally had, like, at least a dozen DMs, like, "Oh my god, I checked my adrenal support supplement. It has 6 of those things in there. Oh my god, I stopped taking this histamine thing, and 2 days went by, and this is the best I felt in months. Thank you so much." Like, literally life-changing improvements from removing the wrong supplements.
Mhm.
And that's why I refer to what I do now. It's not personalized medicine, it's hyper-personalized medicine.
Mm.
One of the biggest differentiators between me and honestly any other company that or coach that I've seen for genetics, again, is the understanding of pharmacology, everything that supplement does. I'm not just making sure it's anti-inflammatory. If you have genetically high iron and you want to lower inflammation, curcumin makes perfect sense for you. My wife has genetically higher iron, always. She absorbs excess. So we had her try curcumin supplement to bring it down. But if you have genetically low iron, which everyone's different, some people are prone to not absorb as much iron. That's the worst possible thing for you. So yeah, figuring out what supplements you should avoid is, I think, equally as important in today's age because most people I
Yeah.
work with are already taking a bunch of supplements. I would say at least 50% of the people I work with that are currently taking supplements are taking something that's working against them.
Mm. That's crazy. That is so crazy. I love the personalized approach, the hyper personalized approach. It really makes a lot of sense. You're making me think a lot about some of the supplements I'm taking as well. Do you ever think about any other alternative therapies, like things that people can do that really can be beneficial for almost anyone? Like, I know you talk a little bit about sauna, infrared light, fitness, things like that. So, what other types of wellness practices can work for people outside of supplementation?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, practicing gratitude, I think breath work can be huge. I always tell people if you can, even a 5-minute walk after each meal makes huge changes for digestion, those types of things. And, the reason why I'm not as vocal about those things, I think, is A, because, well, overall, it's infinitely more saturated than the other stuff I'm focusing on.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people I work with, they already have a naturopath or a nutritionist. They already have these things and they're still not improving how they like to. So then they come to me. So most people that I work with, they're already doing pretty much all of the right things, yet still not getting somewhere. And that to me, and this is why also I think a lot of people I work with, again, why do like there'll be a mutation that, 20% of the population should have, but 80% of my clients have it.
Mm.
Why is that? Well, if you're seeking me out, that means you tried everything else and it didn't
Mhm.
work.
Mhm.
Why didn't everything else work? Because it's a genetic issue. Most it's very rare to find a client that doesn't have mutations that raise adrenaline. And I think part of that's because if you have higher dopamine and higher adrenaline due to mutations, you're going to be more intellectually curious. You're going to be more
Mhm.
likely to overthink. So those are the people that are going to worry more about their health and do something about it. The people that are lower dopamine, those are, they call them the warriors, the people that can handle stress better. So I'm a worrier. I'm a creative. I break down adrenaline slow. The warriors, they did studies on MMA fighters. Most of them have lower levels of dopamine and adrenaline at baseline. So then when they're in a fight, they don't get overwhelmed by the adrenaline. It raises their adrenaline, of course. But like the second I get startled by something, like, I mean, my brain goes to like I can't watch scary movies at all
Oh,
because
yeah.
that fight or flight response just I've literally given my wife a bloody nose because literally I like jolt and like
Oh,
hit into
no.
her and like my fight or flight, I'll be ready to fight for like literally like 5 hours. I literally cannot, even thrillers, even dramas, I can't do. But you see how it's interesting how
Yeah.
studies of people choose their career paths. I think a lot of athletes can handle stress better. They handle the pressure better. LeBron James can shoot that 3-point shot and sink it because his heart isn't pounding out of his chest. You gave me the ball, I would be, and I played basketball. I definitely wasn't, for how much I bodybuild and stuff and how I look, people think I was this insane athlete. Really not the most athletic, hand-eye coordination. I did football, basketball, track, shot put, those things. But, really wasn't the best fine motor skill coordination. And I would get, I'd be put into the game and, I would be very riled up and have to normalize to that. So I think it's
Mhm.
so fascinating. The genetics can tell you so many different things. And like these studies just show how important the genetics are. And it's crazy to me that you have people that just dismiss it entirely. Like I've literally had people, their regular doctor says, oh, those genetics don't matter. Meanwhile, you're a medical doctor, which is astounding. Then you have a lot of these big debunker nutritionist guys on Instagram that are just like, I know they're not necessarily talking to me specifically because there are a lot of people in the holistic space that are kind of just, woo woo, just kind of, use this detox for this or that, and they can harm people. But like, I know for a fact I'm doing this the right way, because I have that proper education there.
Mhm. So, how can you lower histamine without raising adrenaline?
So the histamine and adrenaline are broken down by different ways. They're both excitatory neurotransmitters. Think about it. A Benadryl puts people to sleep,
Yes.
antihistamine.
Yes.
So what would too much histamine do? It'll keep you awake. But you could be ready for bed, but not really sleep well. They literally prescribe antihistamines for sleep. Why don't you just look into how much histamine, from my point of view, it's crazy. Why don't you see how much histamine you're eating? I know tomatoes, coffee, vinegar, and fermented things. Those are the top things I tell people to avoid. And people think it's crazy. I love my coffee. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do a natural green coffee bean caffeine pill with breakfast for now. See how you do. After a month or so, they try coffee again. They're like, "Oh my god, you were right."
Mhm.
Because now that histamine's lower. A lot of coaches will say like listen to your body, but if you're always inflamed, which most people I work with are, you always
Mhm.
feel like crap, you're always triggered. How do you know what food or supplement or whatever is doing that when you're always triggered? So that's why I focus on making sure people could feel what normal feels like. Once you
Mhm.
learn what normal is, low histamine, from in my case, low brain fog. Now, if I have a tomato or if I have too much pickles that's very high in vinegar and histamine, I will feel that brain fog creep up within minutes. Does it totally derail me like it used to? No, but I'll still be maybe 30% less productive because I'm just not my thoughts don't flow as easily. And to
Mhm.
me, I love pickles. Vinegar tastes delicious, but it's really not worth it to me. The tomato isn't worth it for me.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I think most people are reluctant. Most people want to just fit into the system. They don't want to change their lifestyle.
Yep.
When they get to the extreme of having something like you said that they've tried everything and they can't shake it. That's when they're willing to give things up.
Yep. And also, too, I think a big factor is people make these sacrifices and they change their lifestyle and they don't feel that much better. So it's like
Mhm.
changing my whole life just to not really feel that much better. Like I worked with people that I'm like, based on the genes, well, I think everyone should be gluten free personally,
Yeah.
but people with certain mutations can be more of an issue. I had those mutations. I don't do well on gluten. So getting rid of those foods I'm allergic to and going gluten-free completely changed my life with the brain fog. But I've had people that went gluten-free in the past. Like, I didn't really notice anything. Now that we support their cells appropriately and they go gluten-free, then they feel better. They'll message me, "Hey, I had, white bread, I had gluten, and you were right. Now I notice it." Because if it's much easier to notice no inflammation to a little inflammation than it is to notice moderate inflammation to high inflammation. You know what I mean? It's much
Yeah.
harder to tell that. So once we clean people out,
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword here because now I realize I'm so sensitive to like everything. My wife made delicious pasta salad last night, and her being a great wife, she literally made it with no vinegar because last time she made it with a little bit of vinegar, it was so delicious, but I would only be able to have a couple nibbles of it before I would
Yeah.
start getting brain fog. So like I
Yep.
love the vinegar, but that's how we adjust these things. But again, the way I feel day to day, like it's so incredibly worth it. But most people don't actually get those improvements. They can't feel what it's like on the other side. So they're not willing to give these things up because they've been,
Mhm.
how many
Mhm.
times does the doctor say, take this pill, it'll fix it, change this,
Right.
it'll fix it. You know what I mean?
Right. But that's why it's so important to you to help people feel normal, quote,
Yes.
normal first.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
also too, these mutations are not uncommon at all. People think
Yeah.
it's like the one in a million type things. I don't focus on those mutations. I don't do rare disease diagnosis, this
Yeah.
and that. Like legally, I'm not able to do that. People ask me, do I have Ehlers-Danlos or this or that? And I'm like, honestly, I don't cover that. But like a lot of other things can make you feel like crap about vitamins and pathways like that. And we could support it that way.
Mhm. Yeah. It's so beneficial. What kind of things can people do overall to live longer?
Yeah,
Um,
so I think optimizing sleep is without a doubt like the number one. That's the first thing I ask pretty much all my clients.
mm,
Even if they don't put sleep as a top issue, I ask them, is it falling asleep? Is it staying asleep? Is sleep an issue? Like that's a huge one, absolutely. And having close connections, genuine connections with people.
mm,
We are social creatures. A lot of people love to embrace, the toxic workaholic, lone wolf type thing. That's just not how we are. But two things that I think are really important for longevity that are really overlooked. One of them is melatonin.
mm,
So melatonin, I think, is one of the most wrongly demonized supplements. Everyone says sleep is healing. Well, technically, melatonin signaling in your brain is what tells your body to heal. Melatonin literally tells your body to make glutathione, the number one antioxidant. So everyone talks about how glutathione decreases as you age. And I see so many clients popping glutathione tablets or IVs like it's candy. Well, what if you have mutations in how you make, release, or sense or feel melatonin with your cells, which are very common? I have all three of those, and my sleep sucked for a lot of my life. That melatonin is what tells your body to make glutathione. So all these functional medicine doctors, they run all these labs. Your glutathione's low, so take glutathione. Why is it low though? They'll give them N-acetylcysteine, one of the building blocks of glutathione. What about the other building block of glutathione? What about all the cofactors that are needed to make it? You need all of these things together. And you also need signals from your cells like melatonin. It's nighttime. Make more glutathione to help me protect myself for the next day. And, you know, I'm the only one I've seen like looking. Well, people say melatonin is good, but again, I think melatonin decreases as you age.
mhm,
So people say glutathione decreases as you age. I think glutathione decreases as you age because melatonin decreases as you age.
mm.
Me personally, I take melatonin every single night. I take a lot of people, I only recommend the liquid under the tongue. I don't like the
Oh,
tablets at all. And a lot of people take too high of a dose. I genetically break down melatonin slower than usual. I take maybe half a milligram a night. My
oh,
wife can take 1, 2, even 3 milligrams at night, and she'll wake up in the morning not groggy. If I take more than half a milligram, I'll be groggy the next morning because of our mutations. But either way, there's genetics that can make you need more melatonin, but then also our external life. Mutations aside, between the stress, the blue light, the toxins in our world, I'll confidently say I really don't think virtually anybody is getting sufficient melatonin. You may be sleeping, but are you getting enough melatonin signaling? People think of a good night's sleep. I think of optimal melatonin signaling. So I think melatonin is hugely, it also helps. Everyone talks about NAD now. You ever heard of that before?
Yes.
Yeah, really important for DNA repair, all these things. Well, guess what? Melatonin also raises NAD in the body. So all these biohacks, people are paying for these IVs and stuff. I'm like, why don't you just get a $10 bottle of melatonin and take a little bit per night? Even if it's literally one drop, you may not be like, oh, you may sleep okay. Try one drop and still sleep okay. But I think that is a hugely overlooked, very inexpensive way to
Wow.
help with overall longevity. Let me think of the other one. What was the other one I was going to say? Nitric oxide signaling. So nitric oxide is what dilates blood vessels. It
Mhm.
also helps you make glutathione. It interacts with melatonin and this NAD as well. People with with these nitric oxide mutations, and I'd say probably 90% of the time I ask this, it's right on the money. I'll ask someone, "Are your fingers, toes, or nose ever cold?" And they're like, "Oh my god, yes." Well, what do you know? You have 3 mutations in this gene. That means you don't make nitric oxide as well. And what are those mutations linked to? They're linked to diabetes, they're linked to athletic injuries, they're linked to Alzheimer's disease, they're linked to a lot of other things. Nitric oxide also tells your body to make glutathione. So you see here, we have nitric oxide, we have melatonin, and you can get a super cheap pill, maybe $10 a month to help raise nitric oxide in the body. And I love agmatine sulfate personally and L-citrulline. But you see what I'm saying here? Like, try doing those first, and you can feel so much better. And not a lot of people love the new shiny biohack, like this new NAD IV super mumbo jumbo thing. When in reality, I always start with the foundational things. How mutated is the melatonin pathway? How mutated is the nitric oxide pathway? And go figure, nitric oxide decreases as we age as well. So those are two hallmarks of aging that are both linked to glutathione. Everyone talks about glutathione. No one talks about the two things that tell your body to make the glutathione.
It's crazy. It's so important to think about this now. Now you just have me on the bandwagon because we just take these supplements. We
Yep.
take them in willy-nilly, like, thinking that they're gonna help everyone in the same way, and they don't.
Yep.
Beautiful conversation. What do you think is something exciting up and coming in the wellness world?
Ooh, good question. Well, my holistic genetic health mastery course. But I think that, so a lot of people talk about epigenetic testing that could tell you like your biological age, not your chronological age, see if you're aging well. But there's a new test coming out called glycan testing that test these little glycan modifications on your DNA. So it's basically a different way to estimate how well you're aging aside from epigenetics. And this is really new and emerging. This one company reached out. I've been so busy. I need to read up on their tests because if I'm going to offer that, I'm like, send me all the data you have. I really got to make sure, 'cause there's a lot, even the epigenetic testing, I'm still not totally sold. It's as accurate as people think. I don't offer to my
Mhm.
practice. That being said, there are studies that show, you can have an epigenetic age of 50, you start eating healthy and it goes down. So, I'm not saying it's total bullshit. I just, it's a very, very new thing, but this glycan testing is even newer.
Hmm.
But apparently the glycan testing has a lot. I haven't looked at the data yet, but I'm going to. It's been published that it is a lot more accurate at predicting poor healthcare outcomes later on. So I think that's really interesting as well. And there's a lot of different blood blood metabolism markers that seem super interesting as well.
I feel like you need to train people to do
Yes.
what you do.
Yes, that's definitely, yeah, this holistic genetic health mastery course, it definitely is an amazing first start. Any practitioner that wants to learn about genetics 101 basics, as well as I go into my philosophy and how to approach this. Will you be able to start your own genetics practice like off this course alone, this 12-week course? No, but I am going to be, then the next step will be more in-depth practitioner only level training and yeah, educating people how to do this. But I also want to eventually hire people in-house to give these one-on-ones. If right now I give all these myself, and initially part of me was like, I want to be that guy that shakes your hand with all my clients, but I'm realizing now to really scale, I used to think it was disingenuous. Like, oh, I'm not even going to meet these people, whatever. But I got to realize that all these huge doctors, that's just the name of the game. That's just the name of scaling. There's nothing wrong or dirty or shady about that. It's just I'm only one person.
You
So
can
I
help more people.
exactly.
Your role, you're like, this is why you're put here on this earth, is to
Yeah,
help more people. And so figuring out
absolutely.
how to do that is serving the greater
Exactly.
good.
And I think the first step would be hiring people with I'm not sure if it'll be because technically, legally wise, I could hire you to give my consults legally wise, technically,
Okay.
because it's, it's educational purposes. But
Yep.
obviously, whether it's a master's in genetics or, they're going to have credentials, obviously. But
Mhm. Mhm.
even just having one or two people to handle those, and then that frees up a lot of time for me because I haven't, believe it or not, I haven't been learning as much as I normally learn because I'm working. I'm
Mm.
I'm literally giving these consults and, like, all these things, like, I would love to be able to offboard a lot of these consults to people. I get a lot of my time back, and I could continue to go in the literature and innovate and make this process even better and continue to improve upon it. Like, trust me, it's been from 6 months ago, my reports are leagues and miles better. It's also why, it takes longer for me to do it. That's why the price has been increasing. But again, like I mentioned, I'm starting to hit that limit where how much can I jam into an hour without I like talking to people too and hearing from them. So like
Yeah.
I don't want to get it to an hour where I'm rushing to talk and they can't ask questions. That's not really the way to go about that. So yeah, definitely looking forward to hiring some help and people to at first probably I write everything up. I do the analysis and they give the consults. Then honestly, eventually from there, I do think through AI eventually. I think in 5 years, like I won't have a job. Now, I say that because you would need someone like me to train the AI, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
eventually, a lot 90% of this will be able to be done, spit out all automatically based on the genes, based on blood work, based on what you're saying.
Mhm. All right. That's interesting. The AI stuff is a little scary, but
Oh, definitely petrifying, definitely
yeah.
petrifying.
So is that what's next for you? Scaling, helping more people, innovating in your field?
Yeah, so, yeah, like I said, I'm really excited for this upcoming course, I 'cause I've
Yeah.
pretty much all I've been doing for the past year it's just been all one-on-ones, and I love them, but it's just, it can be a lot when I have a lot of these one-on-ones, and there's a way to you don't need my complete deep dive in order to feel better. So if I can help more lives, when I say more minorly, it's still a big change, you know what I mean? So really seeing how this course goes, I like to ideally run this, 2 or 3 times per year with, like, a month gap in between and get things out like that, but yeah, I think from there, the next thing I'm gonna be hiring like a video editor. Right now it's literally me. Everything you see is
One man
100%
show.
me. Literally recording the reels on my walks, doing all these things. Cause I've really been trying to, I don't have any background in business and stuff. I'm definitely more business minded for a science person, but I've been learning so much about business, marketing, taxes, all these different things. And I
Yeah.
want to make sure I had this infrastructure set in place
Yeah.
because I know without a doubt when I start having you know what they look like, the really professionally edited videos where it's, like,
Yes.
engaging with the emojis and stuff to because sadly, you gotta lure people in nowadays. That's just how the world is.
Right. But
So
this
it's
is so
scary, but
important. It is, but it's so important, and it's so important to reach as many people as you can with what you're doing.
exactly.
All right. So because it's the Blessings podcast, we have to talk about your lessons and blessings of life. So can you
Mhm.
tell me what are the biggest lessons that you've learned over the course of your life?
Course of my life. I think one of them is if you build it, they will come. I think another one that's actually been, again, within the past few weeks for me that I'm gonna hold on to me for the rest of my life is there's no need to rush to your destiny.
Yes. And what about your blessings? What are you most grateful for?
Definitely grateful for my wife. Definitely very grateful. I would say my wife and the fact that I have an Ikagi or Ikagi. Are you familiar with what that is?
Yes.
Yeah, so for
Yes.
you guys listening, it's basically something that you're good at, something that you love doing, and something that you can be paid what that you could be compensated well enough for. I think a huge factor for being truly happy is having all three of those things. And, the raw reality is the vast majority of people are not going to have that ikagi in their life, but that doesn't mean you can't have a fulfilling life. A lot of people do these jobs that, they're not absolutely obsessed with, but hey, a lot of people work so they can live, and then
Mhm.
they're fulfilled through their life, not necessarily through their work. They don't hate what they do, but it may not literally be the reason why they think they're on this earth, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I'm just feel like one of my again, my wife, and then also the second blessing is the fact that I have something that I'm so passionate about that I can monetize that people need. Because again, I think very, very few people have that. And whenever there are dark days, I just remind myself of that because you really can't. I feel like either you have that and come across it or you don't. That's not really something you can like build over time, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's almost like the key to self-actualization,
Yes.
and not everybody gets there.
No,
But that's
especially,
okay. Not everybody's
yeah,
meant to get there.
not everyone's meant to get there, and I think too, just in today's world, there's just so much hate and
Mhm.
divisiveness and
Yeah.
stress that purposely make you fear, purposely make you afraid to distract you from these other things. It's just such an uphill battle for people. It is no surprise to me why people feel how they feel today. As I learn more, it's surprising again how little people know how these things they recommend to clients and patients work. But hey, I'm being the change I want to see in the world and really driven to help get that education out there.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Last question. Answer in one word if you can. What is the most important thing?
Happiness. Love was a close second, but they're
Love is
kind of one
always
and the
my
same.
go-to, but I like
Yeah.
happiness too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that kind of sums up who you are because you come across as super fulfilled, even though I know you're thinking about a lot of things and you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of things. You imbue a sense of what fulfillment looks like because you really do live out your passion in life. And I think that's such a great model for how to live,
Yeah, I
and
really
how you can help
appreciate
others.
that, and it's like, of course, on my end, it's like things that I've struggled with is never feeling fulfilled, never being able to just take it all in because I'm like, again, I have this mission. I got to get it out there ASAP. So it's like you don't stop and smell the roses. But again, something the past 2 weeks I've been doing a much, much better job of. And, I know that there'll be stressful days, there'll be horrible days to come. But hopefully, when you zoom out, like I'm just going to be trending in this right direction and not let these things get to me quite as much as they have past. And that's part of growing.
Yep. That's the plight of the highly sensitive person.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us today and really giving us all this amazing information. And so we'll have the information about how people can connect with you to get their genetic testing done, to find out how to optimize their lives and feel the best that they can possibly feel with you and your course and everything that's going on will all be linked down in the notes. Thank you. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, everyone listening, one thing I like to say too is my workflow isn't just for people that are extremely sick or like really miserable with their life. What I like to tell people is, that day when you wake up and it's like you slept good, which may be a rare thing for you, and you feel like it's a 10 out of 10. You're firing on all cylinders. Like it's just a really good day for you. What if I told you that 10 out of 10 day was a 7 out of 10 day? So that's something I like to tell people as well, that it's not just, I'm about health optimization. A lot of people that I work with right now are really focused on being not very sick, which is
Mm.
one aspect of that. But then there's the whole other frontier of getting out of that area where, I'm not anxious, I'm not depressed. I feel pretty good most of the time, but I truly think there's always room for improvement, especially due to the environment we live in today. So thank you so much for having me on. Really hope everyone learned something. And yeah, this was honestly one of my favorite podcasts. I haven't really dove into, stuff about me, personal stuff like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.